And the absolute worst game mode in Warframe goes to Conclave, PvP, all of it. Janky ass, slapped together, void of balance piece of garbage. It's easier to find a random squad in free flight on Earth than it is to get into a match of Conclave, universally discarded by the community. At least Lunaro is removed from the insanity of Warframe's core game, which is not suited for PvP. However, I was in queue to join a match of Lunaro for 20 minutes, and not only did I not get into a match, but no one joined for those 20 minutes I was in there. Also, fuck Rocket League, right? Am I right? I almost forgot about this piece of garbage. Join the mission and go into the open world and then just find deck 12. Just find deck 12. Just find it. No objective marker, no search zone, no hint. Just go through every nook, every corner, every cave until you randomly decide to look here. Awesome game design. When you eventually cave and Google where to go, Distill Firmia. Distill Firmia. Oh, for God's sake. Then you have to shoot the wall, and then you need to throw Firmia at whatever this is. None of this is explained, by the way. Then we have the next phase, which I, to this day, do not understand how it works. I threw it. It splooshed all over. I did it. They said to do the thing, and I did the thing, and this is not doing anything. And now it's suddenly overheating for no reason. Also, the animation is broken too. Just nothing works. It isn't even a fun boss fight. So F, fail. You fail. Good day, sir. These are just horrible and need a total overhaul. They need Jesus, to be honest. If you know how to cheese, the Spectre cannot even move. But when you get here, which is when you're doing the star chart, by the way, prepare to get one shot again and again and again. Most of them is significantly more difficult than the actual bosses on the planet. What is this? There is literally no reason why you should get one shot by a Spectre on a Junction. I hate this planet, I hate this planet, I hate this planet so fucking much. If I was doing a tier list on the different planets... Anyways, this would be triple F tier. What if we made Archwing slow? When after running around like a headless chicken for 30 seconds looking for the objective marker, like where the frick are you going? And then I realize. And I just want to roll over and perish. I want to cease existence. Otherwise, it's just a mobile defense, which I don't even like. Put yourself in DE's shoes for a second, right? So literally everyone and their mother hates Archwing. But what if we turn it into a water level? So I'm going to rank all of the Railjack missions on the Corpus sides together. For those who were dying to hear my opinion on Volatile, however, it's F tier, because other players are F tier. If another brain-dead moron repeatedly lowers the heat after being told repeatedly in chat not to do so, I will with immediate effect combust. Also, in terms of the Corpus Railjack missions, which is what this section is about, I guess, let us say that you don't like Railjack. Do you want to play 30% Railjack and then 70% normal ass mission? Or do you want to play 0% Railjack and 100% normal mission? Or let's say that you do like Railjack. Would you like to only play Railjack 30% of the time when you're playing Railjack? Didn't fucking think so. I don't like Interception, or as it's known colloquially, stand on point with your thumb up your, you know what. Now imagine doing this in Archwing. No real CC, no effective grouping abilities, dumbass guns, and you're doing this solo because no one's doing this with you. And don't forget, you're still playing Archwing. This mission is particularly difficult to complete, not because of the enemies or anything of the sort, it's just that playing this game mode tends to give me an aneurysm. I don't like mobile defense, and I really do not like Archwing. I swear, even before loading into the mission, I start feeling the initial pings of vertigo. I would say that this isn't much worse than mobile defense, but that's not true. Compare Warframe's absolutely brilliant movement system to this unwieldy motherfucker. Also, mission is long, very slow. I'm dying here.
This mission starts with flying around aimlessly, and then you shoot the thing, and then it turns into a mobile defense. Are you kidding me? Well, at least I only have to do it once. I can't believe that I'm saying this, but this Archwing mission could have actually been fun, because it ignores the worthless Archwing combat system and instead turns it into an obstacle course. Okay, I still don't like Archwing period, but it could have been a harmless side activity, you know, low D tier. However, for this mission only, which is all about going fast, there are these landmines which prevent you from going fast.
I seriously loathe being forced to engage in this combat system. It's like that carnival game where you shoot the balloons, but you're also a balloon and you're in the middle of a category 7 hurricane. I can't see shit, Captain. However, it's relatively short and I'll do anything to get out of here, so bring it on. Sabotage Archwing is a straight path to an objective that can be completed in 5 seconds or less, preferably less, than it's straight to Extraction. This is my favorite Archwing game mode because it's the game mode where I have to play the least amount of Archwing. You know, I will give you some amount of points if you, while torturing me, makes it relatively brief. However, I would give you even more points if you just didn't torture me at all.
Alright, it's weeks later and I'm sick as fuck. And also, I'm just sick as fuck. Woe is me, let's keep going. And the worst normal game mode in Warframe is defense. And holy shit, is it defense. Where do you even begin with this one? First up, the entire match is placed inside of this tiny shoebox, relegating the brilliant movement system to emergencies. And instead, we have yeah, right, that one. Also, this is the one mission where it's basically mandatory to bring one of these frames, unless an enemy may shoot the defense objective once, instant defeat, hours of progress wasted right down the drain. If you ever had a frax spawn in before you could and hit the defense objective in the circuit before you had even loaded into the mission, hours of progress lost in seconds. I'll never let it down. Look, I've been beating around the bush, right? Let's address the elephant in the room. Trickle spawns. The fact that enemies spawn in tiny packs continuously over and over throughout each wave leaves you with no real way to expedite the mission. And don't forget, always gotta protect that defense objective. Better glue your ass to it. This is the one mission, well, this is the one normal mission where I'm completely checked out. I'm here solely corporeally. Meanwhile, my soul is off somewhere reading the dictionary to starve off the boredom. You are probably shocked. How did Defection make it up this high on the list? And by the way, don't forget, we're still in F tier. And I forgot to mention this, but F tier is game modes which have something fundamentally wrong with them, meaning I thought that everything below this had something which was even more severe of a problem. Defection actually does something right. It splits up the objectives across the map, allowing you to group up, making the mission easier at the cost of making it slower, and vice versa. With that being said, what the fuck were you thinking? Who thought this was a good idea, seriously? It's an escort mission, basically, and God knows we love those. It's the only mission where the NPC escort does not teleport to you, so once again we can take the aforementioned brilliant movement system and throw it out the window. Why would you make a mission where you are rewarded for sitting in void mode for 2 minutes whenever a Lich spawn? This game mode, not really a game mode, just a modifier. Anyways, it's ruined in 3 different ways. Hyper meta freaks, who, well, freaks out whenever you down the Lich instead of waiting for all the thralls to spawn, which is totally unreasonable to ask of randos, by the way. Number 2 is idiots who don't attempt to kill their Lich, robbing the rest of us of 10 murmur, which is the progress of an entire mission, mind you, because, oh no, I'm afraid they're gonna get too strong and blah 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 blah, and then proceeds to one-shot a level 5 Lich with Bounty, right? And the last part that drives me nuts is the fact that I cannot play with my friends or in an organized group because the Lich missions are only available on 1 planet at a time. Why would you do this? Also, more time spent in the mission means more thralls and a higher chance of the Lich spawning, meaning more time equals more murmur, meaning there is no way to farm this more or less efficiently. It's just a monotone drone from beginning to end. We're now moving into D tier, meaning that these missions won't have anything fundamentally broken about them, but they tend to be utterly boring or just poorly designed overall. Starting us off, we have Help Clem. This is just a normal mission, except it's extended because 5 minutes wasn't long enough, I guess. except we have to babysit this stupid AI. Clem is one of the least competent specters, and that says a whole hell of a lot, doesn't it? At the same time, the mission is way too easy, even for when it's introduced to the fresh installs. So now we have a long mission with progress you cannot actively influence, and you have to protect a spectre the entire time. This is the pinnacle of boring. This has to be the lamest of well, these kind of updates. I mean, it's just Exterminate, except you lose a tiny smidgen of health every second, and I do mean tiny. You also cannot use your primary weapon, which honestly is not even worth discussing further, but it's just that everything about this game mode is deductive to the original Exterminate. You cannot see, you cannot use your primary, and most annoyingly of all, no public matchmaking. That just seems lazy. Let me just say, I think the addition of Frame Fighter and Flappy Zephyr, ooh, don't like that, and all the other hidden game modes are really cool in the addition, in the sense that they give Warframe a more expansive mythos, but judging the game modes themselves, they are utterly boring, right? They're meant to be just a gimmick, and unfortunately that's all that they are. Hold down the button, hold down the button, hold down the button, and just keep holding down the button. If this game mode was not the sole provider of credits, I mean, I guess without a specialized loadout and a whole hell of standing with 2 different syndicates on Fortuna. Okay, what I'm saying is, if this was not the only easy source of credits, this game mode would be as dead as Conclave. The dumbest decision they made was capping the points at 15, meaning, okay, so let me give you an example, right? If you turn in 5 points, you get 2 bonus points. If you turn in 10 points, then you will get 2 additional bonus points. As you turn in 15 points, you will get 4 additional bonus points, but then at 20, you will only get 2 additional bonus points. So after 15, it just rolls over, so it makes it pointless to turn in any more than 15, and this eliminates the whole risk-reward factor. The carrier, the person carrying the points, will always cash in at 15, Mesa will always stand in the same position, holding down the button, and the supports will be standing behind her, spamming their support abilities. Maybe I'm just jaded, but I find this to be too repetitive. Also, of course, I know that you can break from this formula, but you are punished more severely here for doing so than in any other game mode. Are you serious, Hexagon? Are you putting Hijack above the Index? Indeed I am. The concept of driving through the map is at least a little bit cool, but also it's just mobile defense, the only difference being that Inaros gets shafted as usual. Seriously though, I refuse to acknowledge the defense objective eating a tiny amount of shields as more than a cheap gimmick, because that's exactly what it is. Welcome to shove your thumb up your ass and wait 4 minutes. This is basically mobile defense in the sense that you defend a location and there is no way to expedite the mission, only slow it down. Also, the defensive objective area does not move, so plant your roots where you're standing, channel your inner engineer turret and do not move. This game mode would be significantly improved if there were 2 or 3 additional beacons to defend, but there's not, so oh well. Do I like running Netracells? Yes, but that's because I see Archon Shard and the monkey brain goes, "Ugh, loot." But the game mode itself, well, first off, I do like the idea of negative effects you have to pick in the beginning. Unfortunately, you must pick all of them, and they do not hinder you in a meaningful way. Instead of you having to, pick some of them, and the amount of loot you get would then be dependent on how many you did pick. Anyways, the mission proceeds as follows. Go to 3 undefended terminals and press the dedicated cipher key, then kill enemies inside the circle, and thanks God, the circle isn't tiny for a once, but it still kill enemies inside the circle. And then you have to go hunt down a drone inside a marked area, and the TLDW is Netracells is a slapped together glob of unfunny mechanics. These bounties suffer from being the first batch, whereas some of the subsequent open worlds had some of the kinks ironed out, but not here. Most of the bounties just have you standing around waiting for something to happen. The drone escort is especially annoying, and yes, I know you can cheese it, but I don't think an oversight, a glitch, an exploit, whatever you want to call it, on DE's side, that doesn't eliminate the truly terrible design. Like I said, these bounties were a pilot project, and it sure as hell does feel like it. If I were able to remove myself from my own biases, this probably would have made it up into C tier, if only barely that is. It nicely balances killing enemies with managing a secondary mechanic, but it only drops on rotation C. It only drops on C's. AABC. AABC. 5 minutes. It takes 5 fucking minutes to complete a round. It drops only on rotation C. 20 minutes I'll never get back. System. God damn it. System, chassis, system. Where is the neuroptics? Is it even in here? Chassis, system. Where is it? Where is it? Okay, this is definitely going to be the most controversial pick on the entire list. Surely some of you are pulling out your hair and screaming, how can you not like Disruption? Well, seriously, how can you like Disruption? I don't understand. Does it make sense that a weapon that one-shots a boss on a planet barely tickles a Demolist on that same planet, while a different weapon can one-shot a Demolist but barely tickle the boss? It does not. It should not be possible for both of those to be true at the same time, and yet it is. This is without a shadow of a doubt the element of Warframe that gets me the most riled up. Warframe abilities, weapons, mods, arcanes, and so on that does not do what it says that they should do, and at the same time does things which are stated absolutely nowhere. Okay, you need some examples. Arcane Arachne, it stacks additively with weapon damage except on the thrown projectile of Exodia Contagion of all things. Nesha and Ureli states 2 different damage vulnerabilities based on ability strength, but it actually adds the same amount. The ability description of Cephas Tornadoes is actually just wrong. Chroma's weapon damage is additive, but Marat's weapon damage is multiplicative, even though, I mean, come on. The Panther Profiler shoots more quills and much faster than stated. And finally, look at this. Basically every weapon scales differently with this mod. This percentage, it means nothing. And where can I see the effectiveness on this mod given on any weapon? That's right, you can't. While this is not an issue plaguing Disruption solely, far from it actually, it is at its worst here. If you go ahead and copy paste a build from one of the idiots who have sat here for hours testing every weapon and every mechanic of every weapon manually against every damage mechanic to figure out how they actually work, if you copy paste one of those builds, it becomes one of the easiest game modes. If you go ahead casually, however, and just use the weapons you like to use, you know, you're gonna get absolutely rolled. For example, this mod removes base armor from enemies, disallowing the Demolist pulse to restore the armor because you removed it permanently from the base stats. That is nonsense. Are you kidding me? I don't copy-paste builds. That removes the fun of the game entirely, but I'm also not inclined to sit in the Simulacron for hours just to document all of the invisible damage multipliers and damage resistances. And unless bypassed somehow, these Demolist units are unreasonably tanky. These should be many times tankier than a normal unit, obviously, but these should not be multiple thousands of times more tanky. Now we get to C tier, which are mostly fine but has 1 or 2 things holding them back. And I know that you'll complain about every single last item here being above Disruption. I don't care. It's not a good game mode. I think there's a typo somewhere. I do believe this should be called Endo Farm and not Arena. Okay, if I had to play this regularly, I despise this game mode. And also the enemies are on the wrong side of being a little bit too one-shotty, which is never fun for any reason. If you think of Arena as being part of Kayla Defane's boss fight, I think it's interesting, and since it got Sarin of all Warframes, it's okay for it to be a little extra difficult. It's also pretty harmless comparing farming this to farming A, B, C. No, focus, damn it. Okay, yeah, this is like bearable. It's fine, it's whatever. Finally, we find ourselves at the actual mobile defense. Compared to the regular defense, this is much more, well, bearable. I don't have to hunt down the enemies stuck in the fold of the map every single last wave. And between the mind-numbing waiting out the timer, which is pretty hard to defend, there is some movement to restart my brain. It's not an enjoyable game mode by any stretch, but whenever I see it as part of a sortie or something of the like, I just shrug and go, oh well, fine, whatever. This is pretty cool in concept, but since they were never willing to make an actual tower defense mode, this whole system is pointless. The towers, they don't do enough in terms of both damage, but also they don't provide any meaningful support. So it's basically just endless mobile defense. Yuck.
at least the towers are kind of fun to purchase for about 2 seconds. And then it's, oh, right. Okay, so you pick up the key and oh man, do you guys remember when these used to be a thing? Anyways, you bring it to the console and then it's another mobile defense. Oh man. Well, at least I only have to do it twice. And there are trigger spawns between the two of them. Oh, even better. Okay, look, the only reason why this is above Mobile Defense and Mobile Defense version 2, also known as Void Armageddon, is that at the very end of it, there is an assassination, and I have to place one above the other. So I guess this is where it goes. I could try and make up a reason for why the Kuva vacuum is all the way down here in C tier, like how much you end up standing around. Ultimately, all I can say in good faith is that it fails the vibe test. I just don't have fun playing any mission type the Siphon can occur in. It makes any mission it appears in worse. It just is not a fun side activity. These missions comes early enough as to provide a bit of difficulty as well as a source of early resources and way more importantly, credits. However, once you reach the index, which you will in a few days if you play actively, these missions becomes almost entirely pointless. You'll be better off just progressing the star chart and getting to the steel path. Are you ready for this? You're not ready for this. Okay. Mobile defense. And I hate it so much. But otherwise, I find the rest of the bounties to be fairly alright to play. Yes, even the crate one, once you know where they spawn, it takes no time at all to find them. And I like that it's a skill expression whereby improving you can actually do the mission faster, which is the problem I have with most bounties otherwise. And at least these crates won't spawn 17 billion miles below ground in a tiny nuke. I think of this as mobile defense, but you have something to do while you wait in terms of bringing power cells. No, not those, damn it. You can also decide to shoulder the added difficulty by splitting your team in twine and doing 2 excavators at once. The only gripe I have with this game mode is how brittle the excavators get after a while. I get the difficulty should ramp up over time, but there's no reason why these need to blow up from full health in 0.1 seconds. This is mostly a circuit issue, but still it's annoying. We're now all the way up to B tier. These missions don't wow me, but they also seem aware of their own unimportance, getting out of the way, allowing you to enjoy the stellar gunplay and the brilliant movement system. If I had to title this section something other than a letter, it would be meh. Don't expect me to have a whole hell of a lot to say about some of these. If I had to describe this game mode with one word, it would be pointless. Since they reworked the way that you get Steel Essence, there's really no reason for this mission type to exist anymore. It doesn't make it any more or less enjoyable. But hey, if you want 5 Steel Essence, here you go, buddy. These are basically just normal missions, except you have some absolutely useless specters running around in massive air quotes helping you. These don't make the mission any more or less enjoyable either, but hey, if you want some syndicate standing, here you go, buddy. These are interesting from a lore perspective, actually getting to see some of the implied conflict play out in game, but other than adding some enemies to exterminate missions, these are just, well, normal missions, where the enemies shoot at each other from time to time, hardly worth writing home about. These also occur early enough to offer a fun challenge to new players. They're not difficult per se, as the mission name would suggest, but the modifiers are fun and unique, and the reward is actually worthwhile for new players. A fine addition. This is again geared toward newer players, comparing babysitting a worthless spectre to running a timed obstacle course. Well, it's hardly fair. New players need Endo, but in order to get it, you have to nut up and learn some actual movement, no more hand-holding, which is how it should be, by the way. The rest of Warframe could learn something from this. It might not be fair to rank all of these together, but since we're doing all of the assassinations as one game mode, well, I guess this is fair to me. I don't know. And again, it's just disruption, it's just mirror defense, it's just assassination. The only game mode I feel like ranking separately is Alchemy, and so I will later. More than anything, these bounties benefit from borrowing from established game modes and improving upon them. The secondary objectives are also not completely overbearing, like go and find a needle in a literal haystack. I'm looking at you. And while farming standing can be bloody annoying, I didn't think it was in this case.
I appreciate, especially considering the time when this was released, I appreciate that they attempted to make Warframe content more difficult. It also was released at a time where the AoE meta was in full swing, hence the shield runs that makes enemies unkillable until destroyed. This is definitely a case of legacy design, where the no bleed out mechanic is rendered more or less pointless since most builds are geared towards the steel path, which makes it almost impossible to die in Arbitration, unless you bring a glass cannon build of course, but at which point that's your own damn fault. AoE weapons are also not as oppressive as they used to be, which makes the drones less of a genuine challenge and more of a split-second annoyance. While this game mode is mostly pointless nowadays, it also isn't annoying to play, which is hence why it's all the way up here. Sorties are not really a game mode and more of a activity of multiple game modes, but what the hell, I'll include it. The abundance of riven mods makes sorties less universally rewarding, but still, at the time when you unlock them, there really isn't a good reason why not to do them. It will also be the most difficult content you've done up until this point, which provides a much needed difficulty spike preparing you for when the difficulty seriously ramps up on the steel path. Other than the radiation bubbles, which are pretty frustrating, none of the modifiers are super unfun. Since sorties can contain most main missions, how fun it is on any given day is basically luck of the draw, which is why it's here basically square in the middle of the list. How long is this video? We need to run down some of these quickly. Survival is a mind-dead killing box, I'll admit that, but I find that to be rather enjoyable, but only in short bursts. This is the same as before, except for the elite units spawning periodically, breaking up the monotony. Since this appears immediately above normal survival, you might think that I don't put a lot of stock in that, and you'd be correct. I'm running out of things to say about these. There is nothing remarkable or enjoyable about capture, but unlike, well, a lot of missions unfortunately, this one doesn't make me stand around with my fist firmly inserted into my own. I'm not gonna pretend like there is some significant difference between this and capture. In fact, the difference is so insignificant and minute that I can describe it in a single sentence. You press X on the thing before shooting it, not after. Okay, now I'm really running out of things to say. Look, killing shit in this game is fun. If it wasn't, this game would be dead. Even when the objective is awful, when it's drone and needlessly convoluted, killing stuff still be fun. Which is why Archwing is so hated, I think. It's because it takes that away. And the movement system as well, let's not forget about that. The rest of the game modes in B tier are, well, it doesn't feel like they ought to be this high. In terms of rescue, it's not really any different than pressing X on the capture target, right? There is a few more steps, but at least to experienced players, the whole stealth aspect is null and void. However, you never go, oh, well, fuck that, when you see a rescue mission, do you know what I mean? But at least personally, I'm not really blown away by the rescue mission either. A lot of people seem to dislike Hive, which I totally understand, but I do wonder if it's because they don't know to follow their spore trails. But also, they literally show up on the minimap now with a squad of 4 people that poses no real blockage to your progress, meaning that you're moving most of the time, which is what keeps it out of C tier, since I hate standing around. Surely you people are still rating about Disruption down in the comments, but I cannot help but feel a lot of you would have put spy missions in like F tier or something, and I found that to be mostly unfounded. If you want to play spy missions like, you know, actual stealth missions, you totally can, however, you don't have to. Wukong's second ability lets him move omnidirectionally with significant speed, and while in his cloud form, he's not affected by sensors and lasers, allowing you to clear any spy objective without breaking a sweat. Plus, 60 seconds after screwing up is plenty of time to get to the console, as long as you remain calm. The main thing I appreciate about spy missions is, once again, the fact that you are moving the whole time, you're not idling next to a console. Deimos is absolutely gorgeous, like it really is. Visually, it's just a treat. I think it's the most interesting area in the entire game, maybe except for the Weary. I'm always happy to spend time here, just because of how inspired the design of the world is. It's also here DE finally seems to have figured out that running around doing something is more fun than standing around waiting for something to happen. A tier. All the game modes in this tier is either exceedingly fun or particularly inspired in their design. With this first one, it's certainly not super fun to play, but the idea is brilliant. You'll never actually die to the Sanuka Hunter in modern Warframe, but if you did, you'd lose your Warframe and you'd have to do a small stealth mission to steal it back. That's just fucking cool. The idea that Kuva Survival is actually just an endless version of mobile defense is not lost on me, so let me explain. I'm a huge fan of letting players take risks for an increased reward. By activating the Kuva life support tower thingy, you'll enter into a sub-objective of doing a mobile defense while still having to maintain the main objective, that of the survival and the life support. You also give up some of the effectiveness of the life support tower, about half, by turning it into a Kuva siphon. My only complaint is that you're not allowed to push it further for an even greater challenge and an even greater reward, like for example activating multiple life support towers at once, or adding more capsules for even more Kuva but even less life support, in terms of how far you can stretch your team before it breaks. More of this, please. Alchemy. Okay, I can't defend this position, I changed my mind, it's only B tier. I do like how killing seamlessly works alongside the main objective to create a holistic experience that's both fast-paced and concise. It's nice that it gives you something to do while in and out of combat. However, in the second half, where you have to manage the pressure, 3 people have to sit with a thumb up there, hoo-ha! Any attempt at teamwork is doomed to fail, since breaking the pressure valve moves the gates the entire width of the targeted area, and there is no real way of knowing when a teammate is about to break a valve at the same time as you are. This could easily be fixed by making the gates move more slowly and have each pressure valve move it less, but as it is, I used to absolutely hate this mode, but since my friend noticed the trails inside the scanner, which will lead you straight to the target, it has become a seriously fun side activity. If it was like a main game mode, which I had to play often, surely I feel differently about it, but as it stands, it's a fun break from the slaughter. Speaking of the slaughter, this is nothing but unhinged mass murder. I mean, this is kind of ridiculous, right? The whole mode is based around running around, blowing up not only the enemies, but the map itself. That's a slight exaggeration. While I tend to enjoy game modes with a bit more thought put into them, I mean, I found every point of focus in here and I enjoyed it. I'm not gonna try and deny that running around being overpowered isn't fun now and again, and the Sanctuary Elite Onslaught captures that perfectly. Speaking of side objectives, there aren't a whole hell of a lot of them in Warframe, but man, I can only wish. You're not forced to bring the entire squad into the Grand Void, though you will only get the reward if you do, which I think is a huge mistake. I really like the idea of sending members of your squad off to handle side objectives, especially because I feel like a lot of the time you end up fighting for the content instead of each person having their own responsibilities to handle. It would also help discourage leeching, which is currently kind of out of control. On release, I scoffed at Void Flood and the other Zariman modes as well actually, but I've come around on them. Void Flood is like 85% jumping around, and I think if they reworked it to be 75-25 split between jumping around and shooting enemies, it would be perfect. Even as it is, it's pretty damn fun, and it straddles the line between being stressful and brain dead. You can still chill, but you have something to do, which isn't, standing around, and nor is it spamming explosives. This game mode might be capped to 4 active rifts at any given time. However, what keeps it from being a boring version, a 2.0 of Interception, is the fact that they can spawn all over the place and you constantly have to move from one to the other. I really appreciate that DE dared to challenge the players a little bit and force them to make a decision, whether to defend one of the rifts or move on and have faith in their teammate who were closer to it, and instead move on and clear another rift for the tenno. This simple aspect truly elevates this game mode by such a crazy amount. Most of the time, Warframe boils down to shoot the thing in front of you or move towards the yellow thing in front of you, or sometimes it's red or even green. The linear nature of most missions, I think anyways, really undermines the dynamic movement system, and so even presenting two options at any given time makes for a much more enjoyable experience. If I was a betting man, I'd wager that you, yes, you specifically, you hate Railjack. Well, I don't. Even in its now lesser version of itself, I still think it's great. This mission intends to induce a feeling of pushing into your adversary's final, last desperate stand, and it accomplishes this spectacularly. A+, great job. And yes, I know about Banshee and one-shotting, don't link me, assuming you don't ruin the experience for yourself. It's great.
Ironically, this is actually a mobile defense since it's based on a timer instead of waves, and somehow it made it all the way up into A tier, and that's for one specific reason. This mission have two objectives at the same time, which requires two completely different toolkits. Now in reality, one of them ends up being way more important than the other. However, I'll still say that I've never appreciated a Titania doing her task this much while I did my own. It didn't feel like we had to fight for the content.
Now this, in huge quotation marks once again, game mode gets a lot of points as a weekly task just because it isn't completely overindulging, taking several hours I'm looking at you, or just completely annoying looking at you. Yes, it really is just high-level sorties with a more interesting boss fight at the end, but thanks God it's weekly and not daily. But also I think the Archon boss fight, now after its rework, it actually offers a nice difficulty spike and it has a unique reward, which is always exciting. I really wanted to put this in S tier, I really did, but there are several reasons for why it doesn't quite deserve being that high. First up, it's riddled with bugs and game-breaking glitches, which can be circumvented with enough practice, but that doesn't change the fact that it's full of bugs and game-breaking glitches. I hate how griefable it is. If people keep bringing lures, it can be literally impossible to complete the hunt, and even when told to fucking stop, nothing, no brain activity. It's annoying that they keep breaking this game mode as well. DE, I mean. I was using the Ivara method, and now the tether will no longer connect to the Eidolon, killing this strategy completely. And why? Why? It wasn't even meta at all. Why would you nerf it? I don't want to learn the Volt strat. I hate my run's success depending on the fucking spawn cap. It's a small thing really, but it was enough to kill my enjoyment entirely, and so I think it's fair to put it in A tier. I'm gonna do Ascension a favor and separate it from the mobile defense, which is attached to it, and so it's, man, it's so frustrating that you can't just, Okay, so imagine this, right? The developers are like, oh, finally, we made this fun and dynamic game mode, and then it's like, but it's not long enough. Like, what do you mean it's not long? Yeah, it's not long enough. The grind is too fast. It's not annoyingly long enough. But you know, what about the enjoyment? Fuck that! Add a mobile defense to it. No! This fucking blows. Putting aside the obsessive compulsion DE has to waste my time at the cost of wringing out all the fun out of the game, Ascension is actually a well thought out game mode. I thought it was rather boring when I first played it, but that's because I didn't understand the mechanic to speed up the elevator, which granted could have been explained better. But still, there is something to do, not just standing around, and the progress of the mission is to some extent dependent on your ability as a player. Wow! What a concept! I forgot to mention this when talking about the Deimos bounties, but I really like how they basically allow you to store standing for the following days, meaning when you have a good bounty, you can just farm all of the standing you need. The bounties are also just actual missions with an added condition, and if that condition is to kill a Void Angel, money, money, money! It's also helped by the fact that most of the Zariman missions are upper tier anyways. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that this is where we start getting into the really good stuff, even though we're not quite in S tier yet. And starting us off, we have the lone story. It's unfortunate DE couldn't stop themselves from shoving their foot in their mouth again. It's sad the experience has to come to a grinding halt just so we can do a 5-minute survival. And unlike the circuit, the random factor is more of a detractor than a boon here. However, the main content of the lone story is great and just so different. Unlike most of Warframe's content, the distractions around the Weary doesn't feel so oppressive and frustrating. You don't feel boxed up in the same kind of way. No arbitrary limits on how much you may progress. And it finishes with a spectacular boss fight. First in the Weary and then a proper boss fight afterwards. And despite my grievances, this is always a lot of fun. I've encountered nothing but hate and vitriol for this game mode, and I don't understand where it's coming from. If it was its own game, yes, I would get bored real fast, but it's such a nice break from Warframe's neck-break pacing. Yes, the objectives can be a little annoying until you learn them, but they even let you keep the progress between runs. Most things straight up shows up on the minimap now, and they give us extra stonks. I'm genuinely a little bummed out they basically removed it by taking away its only incentive. I mean, what's the harm? Come on, give us one more shot. Come on. I love Railjack. Yes, it was a broken mess on release twice. And yes, they watered it down for no reason really, but even then, this is the most dynamic game mode, allowing for the greatest amount of teamwork and the greatest amount of player skill expression, maybe except for Eidolon hunting. Each member of your team has a distinct role to play, and still, pockets of spontaneous teamwork will just appear randomly, and experienced players will be able to take advantage of this. And while the Archwing is a failed attempt at bringing the core gameplay of Warframe into a free omnidirectional movement system, your Railjack feels much like a Warframe, powerful and surprisingly agile. I am cheating, I'll just admit that. This obviously isn't one game mode, but the game and the Wikipedia categorizes it as such, so fine. These missions are usually the final challenge on a planet, and by the very nature of them, they are more unique and intricate than any other mission on that planet. Some of them is really awful, and some of them is just nothing at all. However, I can't argue that assassination missions tend to be rather fun, right? Who doesn't like a good boss fight, right? I'm right, of course I'm right. We finally made it to S tier. There isn't a whole lot of modes up here, but woo boy, I won't have anything negative to say about any of these, except the first one. Honestly, my complaint is super minor. It's just that extraction targets being one-shot is really annoying. The tools to prevent them from dying is pretty much limited to 2 Warframes, maybe 3, which doesn't work well with the randomness of the circuit. Maybe you thought I was going to complain about the defense missions, but since the rework shortly after the release, there really hasn't been any issues. Enough of that. Let's talk about why this game mode is so great. You know what the circuit makes me realize? The full potential of Warframe. When you strip away all of the nonsense at the very top and allow the rest of Warframe's massive catalog of Warframes and weapons to see actual use, you get to experience what Warframe would be like if everything wasn't permanently locked in place, disabled, and dead 3 tiles away. And it's awesome. Struggling against the odds with what you have been given, seeing how far you can go, instead of crouching all the way to level cap for free. To offset this weakness of randomness bestowed upon you, you have been given a unique upgrade system, also random by the way, in form of the decrees. Do I need to explain why getting a good build going in here is way more exciting than just loading into a mission with a good build already equipped? I'm not saying that there aren't minute things worth looking into fixing or otherwise improving, but I'm not interested in talking about them when this game mode is so far above everything below it. This is the most fun I've had in Warframe for years. I don't need to say anymore, but I will. The Duviri experience doesn't feel like Warframe. Playing it for the first time, it felt like playing one of those old school PS2 games. I personally was reminded of exploring the world of Jak and Daxter. The balance is completely reasonable, at least at first, but that's part of the charm. The world is endearing and intuitive, and so is most of the tasks littered around the world as well. And that's it, right? They feel like tasks, like activities instead of roadblocks. It's not like you're running around having fun and then all of a sudden DE descends from their ivory throne and tells you that you have to watch this console for 90 seconds. I've already mentioned this, but the Oro Worm boss fight is perfect. It's in contender for the best boss fight in the game, both in terms of design and in terms of its build-up. Hopefully, you're not surprised. This had to be up here somewhere. Now, would I be lying if I said that this had nothing to do with the inherent excitement of gambling? Yes. However, I will also say that there isn't a single mission type which is not improved by a Void Fissure. And I'd say that most missions are significantly improved. And that speaks to the simple genius of the design of this game mode. There is currently only 2 world bosses in Warframe. 3 if you consider the Exploiter Orb, I guess. 1 if you don't consider the Prophet Taker, since its boss fight is only inside of an instance, and we're getting way off topic. Anyways, the Prophet Taker is, in my opinion, peak design. I think a lot of people would argue that Eidolons are better, and while I could see a few ways of playing Devil's Advocate, I believe the Prophet Taker is better. First up, the entire mission doesn't come crashing down because one idiot doesn't speak English. It's not relying on obscure metagame knowledge like the distance from the player in which an enemy can spawn. When you play it for the first time and you've been scrambling to get anything done, and then Little Dog comes on and says, is this a bad time? At least for me, that was a real oh shit moment. It also refrains from instantly undoing all of your progress because you allowed it to get off one attack. Great design, guys. Yay! It's Railjack again. I don't have a lot to say, which isn't great since this is the second best game mode in the game. Go back and listen to my section on Railjack skirmishes, and keep in mind, I think that Void Fissures are one of the greatest mechanics in the game. I think this is the greatest game mode in the entire game. I really do. It has everything I look for in a great game mode. The ability to take on added risk for a higher reward. Again, what a crazy concept. I can't believe it. In all seriousness, this is not the only game mode to do this, but it does it the best, and it's not even close. It incorporates some of the same randomness as the circuit, but as a modifier. I think forcing some of the not completely busted items into play is great. It really opens up the game in a really fun way, and it forces you to actually think. Speaking of which, it's really difficult. When they said Netracells were difficult, I just shook my head because they really are not. But Deep Archimedia really is tough, and it's tough in a different way every week. I feel like they've been trying to do something like this for years actually, and it's only now that all the parts are welding together true. This is peak Warframe, and I would love to see some more of it. Also, I forgot the actual best game mode, which is trading in the dojo. It's great, I do it all the time. Wow, you're still here? Thank you for watching all the way through. Thank you. Sorry if I was a little understated in this video. Like I said, I was sick once again. You know, this was supposed to be a nice and easy video, and I didn't realize that I fucked up until I'd written 9 pages worth of script, but I was in too deep at that point. Anyways, this was just an excuse to get a bunch of B-roll. So, I'll see you in the next one.